Let's say it's a perfectly legal VFR night. Clear skies, good visibility, no instrument flight plan. You take off from a non-towered airport and begin turning towards your destination as soon as you're comfortable doing so. The problem is, you may have just made the most dangerous turn of the entire flight. At night, terrain doesn't care whether you're VFR or IFR. And unlike daytime flying, you often can't see the obstacles you're turning toward until it's too late. Back up an hour earlier, and here we are arriving at Keene in New Hampshire. The sun is setting, but we can still clearly see the terrain rising around the airport as we fly in. The winds are strong out of the north, so we use runway 2 to land. We taxi off and park on the ramp. We're waiting to pick up some friends and depart to the west a little later. As we wait, the sun goes down and it becomes darker. That same terrain we saw on the way in is now harder to spot. Not being able to see terrain VFR is a scary notion, but under IFR, it's kind of the whole point. Luckily, IFR procedures can help us depart safely from here even when we're VFR, even when we've never taken an instrument lesson in our lives, let alone have a current IFR rating or aircraft. This airport, like any other with instrument procedures, has a section in the Terminal Procedure publication dedicated to takeoff minimums and departure procedures. When we landed, we used runway 2 because of winds. The winds haven't died down much here, so we'd like to use the same runway to depart, but we're not sure about clearing terrain in the dark. Luckily, there are 4 total runways to choose from at Keene. The first section deals with takeoff minimums. These are the minimum weather you generally must have to depart IFR on these runways if you're operating for hire. Runway 2, which we prefer, has standard minimums, which means 1 statute mile of visibility for our single-engine Cessna. The other 3 runways have similar or higher visibility minimums, but also have a minimum cloud ceiling, with runway 14 having the highest minimums at 900 feet and 3 miles. Now, we're departing VFR, so not only do these regs not apply, but we should have much better weather anyways. But it's important to think of the reason why these minimums are here. They exist to allow you to visually avoid terrain on the climb out. For runway 14, you need to stay out of the clouds until 900 feet, meaning there's terrain you need to keep eyes on until clearing that altitude. That's not as much a consideration on runway 2. Looking at the next section, we also have minimum climb gradients. Again, we're not bound by this as a VFR flight, but they're based on climbing and maintaining a minimum height above obstacles and terrain. The higher the required climb, the higher the terrain profile, and runway 2, our favorite one, has the second highest required climb gradient, 360 feet per nautical mile, beaten out only by runway 14. What we're starting to do here is build this decision profile of which runway to use before we even get to how we should depart. Runway 14 seems to be the obvious first one to exclude. It has the highest weather minimums and climb gradient, and with winds out of the north, we'd be taking off with a tailwind component. Runway 2 isn't bad, we used it coming in and the winds favor it, but the climb gradient is still pretty high. Runway 20 has a bit lower climb and you only need 300 foot ceilings, but the winds would be completely at our back here. Runway 32 requires only a 280 foot per nautical mile climb, the shallowest option, and although we have to maintain that angle through 2,700 feet, once we're through 2,700, we can continue on a standard climb gradient, which is 200 feet per nautical mile, not too much shallower. With the winds out of the north, there'll be a slight crosswind, but it's still doable. We should run the takeoff and climb performance calculations for our aircraft and make sure we can make the required climb and have enough runway, and assuming we can, we choose runway 32. Now, how do we depart? If we simply take off and make a left turn to the west en route, we could be in trouble. And we can see that if we look at the departure procedure in the next section, it says to make a climbing right turn to 350 degrees, and once reaching 2,100 feet, we can then proceed on course, which for us will be a left turn to the west. If we made that left turn too early, we'd be in trouble with terrain, just as we saw at the beginning of the video. Instrument departures depend on clearing the departure end of the runway at least 35 feet above the threshold, maintaining the prescribed minimum climb, and crucially, starting all turns when 400 feet above the threshold. For us, that'll be 900 MSL. So when we reach that altitude, we can make our right turn to 350 and continue the climb. Then, when we get through 2,100, we can make a left turn out to join our course to the west. So without a single IFR lesson under your belt, you can make use of IFR departure procedures to plan the proper runway to take off from and the actual procedure to get to your cruise altitude. The departure procedure only keeps you safe within an area around the field, so make sure you're climbing to a safe altitude for cruise, which will keep you clear of all terrain on your route. But this planning can help with the initial stage of flight. Whatever stage of training you're at, Flight Insight has a course for you. Check out our full suite of training programs today at the link here and in the description.